Farm for Profit Podcast. Take a listen, have a blast. Farm for Profit Podcast. Learn about farming while having a laugh. Farm for Profit Podcast.
And listeners, this is a What's Working in Ag segment. We love bringing these to you because it does exactly what we say. This is something that is new and working in agriculture. Pleasure of mine to have two guests with us today. I have Alex Susko and Bill Dieterich, both of them here to share a little bit about this new technology. Guys, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Tanner.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Bill,
you.
Let's start with you. Why don't you jump in and tell them a little bit about who you are and what you do, and then we'll get to Alex.
Yeah, sure. Great. First of all, excited to talk about BiOWiSH on a broader scale and to all your listeners, Tanner. I'm the Senior Executive Vice President of BiOWiSH Technologies. What does that mean, really? It means I support our agronomy business globally. You know, that's obviously sales is an important aspect of that, but it's also about the support teams, the field technical support teams, and BiOWiSH takes a different approach and even goes further into that with global laboratory relations and engineering departments and the like to our partners. So, that's what I do at BiOWiSH. What have I done before BiOWiSH? I have roughly about 25, 30 years of experience in managing agribusiness, right? Hate even saying that with the age that brings with it. But it is true. And so prior to BiOWiSH, I was the chief operating officer of another manufacturer of biological products that served the agricultural, animal feed, and municipalities. But for a broad part of my career, I managed parts of the world's largest agriculture and environmental laboratory. So that laboratory today does, tens of thousands of soil samples with fertility recommendations. And it's really the core to what BiOWiSH does is an agronomic first approach. So really the career all kind of ties together and gets me here to BiOWiSH and bringing this new innovative technology to the marketplace.
Nice. I love the experience, and that's what our listeners are always looking for, is some experts in the industry. Alex, how about yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Alex Susko, and I am the agronomy product manager for BiOWiSH Technologies. So what that entails during my day job is really managing all of our field trial activities that go on in the U.S. and around the globe. So that's trialing existing commercial applications on broader scales with distributors, but also working on new products and new formulations from our R&D pipeline and working to scale those up and assess initial field performance. I also do a substantial amount of work as well with our data science. I manage that. And I also do just general other software-related things. So anything related to software, data science, things like remote sensing, monitoring that we do on large-scale demo trials, that's something that I assist with as well. So that's really the day-to-day logistics of my job. I joined BiOWiSH in 2021 as the data scientist at that point. And prior to that, I have experience in equipment manufacturing, specifically on the software engineering side. And I did a lot of graduate research in actually cereal grains lodging. So kind of ag engineering, the interaction between wind stress and plant lodging, and looking at the genetic underpinnings of how plants resist being blown over in storms, essentially.
Nice. That is exactly the expertise we are looking for. But now you've alluded to it that you work for BiOWiSH Technologies. Why don't you guys tell us who they are and what you guys are up to?
Yeah, sure. So BiOWiSH is a company based out of Cincinnati, Ohio, right? And we truly are an innovation company. And that starts with our board chairman. Our board chairman is ex-global lead for Procter & Gamble division of the R&D and extends to a lot of touches of the R&D science and P&G. Hence the reference to Cincinnati as our headquarters. But the main point of that being, Tanner, is that we really are an innovation company. And what do we innovate with? Biology. Biology is our core. And specifically within the agronomy business, because we do have a couple other segments, but within the agronomy business, what we do is we have endophytic bacillus that we deliver to the farmer by adding them to fertilizer. So we are a fertilizer enhancement. We're not your traditional biological apply it to the soil technology. We are a fertilizer enhancement, and we work with major fertilizer companies around the globe. For your listeners, probably the most recognizable name in this region would be ADM. ADM is launching our product this year after multiple reviews and thousands of acres of evaluating our technology. So what do? We put biology stable onto fertilizer through the logistics chain, and we draw a good value proposition through with the farmer with the collaboration of our partners around the globe.
Exactly. And so when we talk what's working in ag with our listeners, it's usually a new service or a new product or one that we're just learning about that we want to share with them. So Alex, what does BiOWiSH Technology offer? What are we looking at today?
Yeah, so the main product that is distributed in the U.S. is BiOWiSH Crop Liquid, and as Bill said, that is coated onto fertilizer, and it's for bacillus species. So bacillus are obviously a huge group of bacteria, but there are select species that are actually co-evolved to live in plant roots via what's known as the rhizophagy cycle. And so these organisms can go in and colonize the roots. They're actually responsible for a large amount of root hair elongation in the plant itself. And therefore, with those root hairs come things like, more surface area for water uptake, nutrient uptake, and so forth. The microbes themselves also bring in a substantial amount of those nutrients. So these are a group of bacillus that are not only do that in the soil, but the nice thing about our microbes and also our other technology in the crop liquid is that it's stable over long periods of time. So these are microbes that in the crop liquid formulation itself, unopened, are stable for up to 3 years. And when coated onto fertilizers such as urea, it's stable for up to 1 year under ambient storage conditions, that are common in most of the Midwest, just in general warehouse conditions, etc. Mm-hmm. So that's the really unique thing about this is the stability that these microbes are able to withstand while in storage. And then again, once they hit the soil conditions, warm and wet, above 55 degrees or so, and moisture, that's when they come out of dormancy and they're able to migrate through the soil and find their way to a plant root to begin their cycle.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add to that for a second, Tanner, and say, why is that different from a lot of different technologies you see in the marketplace as there are others? And I go back to the innovation piece of who BiOWiSH is, who's the core to BiOWiSH. And really for us, it's a 3-phase process, right? There's the screening process to find which biology you want to start with. And we've developed what we believe is the world-class and leading screening process to make sure that we're starting with the right biology as a first place, for the desired benefit that we're looking for the farmer. And through that, we have a manufacturing process that is very robust, and again, we believe industry leading with all of our R&D members and production members on the team that have a lot of background that bring us into that space. The third piece, though, is something that is also unique within the industry, and that piece is what we call our post-fermentation intervention. And that post-fermentation intervention means that BiOWiSH adds things to the product besides the biology. Many of those things are patentable, but we choose to protect them through IP, but they are absolutely critical to the performance and the differentiation of our technology. So you really must consider all 3 phases of that as you bring a biological product to the marketplace that you want to have perform both consistently and give a good economic return for the farmer.
Well, that's what we're about here on Farm for Profit is, we face a lot of things in agriculture, from increased regulation to slimming profit margins, just to the time and efficiency of making sure we're ready to go in season without any delays. Is this something that you guys have thought about when you put your product out to market?
Tanner, it's honestly one of the reasons we selected to do our podcast with your group, right? Is because we always start with the farmer and work backwards. And we make sure that all of our channel partners are having the same viewpoint. So if it doesn't work for the farmer, we nix it, right? It's just, we're done. And so you'll see as you investigate and as we do more of these in the future, how farmer focused we are as an organization. So absolutely, it starts with, what's the habit change that it takes on farm? Are we really disrupting their operation and changing what they have to do? And with BiOWiSH, this is why we took the approach with so much research to make sure we were stable, not only on urea, as Alex mentioned, but other solid fertilizers and liquid fertilizers. We're equally as stable in UAN and many other fertilizers. Please go to our webpage and see our stability document. It's very impressive. But so now that we got a product that we know that's efficacious to the farm and can get there, we want to make sure that it works across a broad range of operating conditions and management practices. But at the end of the day, that yield uplift, it's not difficult in ag to get yield uplift, right? We can do that. There's a lot of ways to do it. But do you do it in a way that makes input cost to a cereal grain farmer reasonable, right? That's the first thing we start about. Most people focus on what's my return on investment. That's not what we start. I own a farm. I look at it and say, what's my input cost? What's my risk? And does it make sense for me to try it on a sub portion of my ground this year? Then from there, I look at what that return on investment is. Then I go to year 2 on my farm and I say, hey, worked last year, had a good ROI for that input cost. Let me see if it works again this year. And by year 3, I'm across my farm. So it's no different with what we're trying to do with BiOWiSH, and we look at it from that aspect, farmer first.
No, that's good, because that's exactly what our listeners are looking for. And I know they want me to ask you, and we don't need a big in-depth answer, but what kind of a yield bump are we looking at, Alex?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so on average across all crops, all fertility, all fertilizer types around the world, it's 7.7%. So that's everything grouped together, and that with that yield uplift, the other important thing to consider there also is the win rate percentage. So of our trials, what percentage of those are wins versus losses? And that ends up being 86.2% off the top of my head here. So what that means is that 86% of the time, we can reasonably expect a trial to succeed at that win rate on average. And now going more specifically into Midwestern crops. So for corn in the U.S., we did our corn globally is about 5.7%, and with a win rate that is also, I'm just going to look it up here, 82.5%. We did a trial last year, a large-scale demo trial across 16 farms, primarily Missouri, Illinois, and Kentucky, the Ohio, Mississippi river meetup area, around 5,000 acres in total. That yield uplift ended up being 6%, and with a win rate of 87.5%. So you see very consistent, effects of these bacillus. And again, because they're broadly found in large amounts of plant species, it's just a matter of getting them onto the fertilizer and making sure that fertilizer is distributed so that every field has them and they can find their way to the plants, and that's how you get these benefits.
I like that. And I like the win rate percentage. I don't know if I've heard that from any guests before. Even if you're not targeting a huge windfall in yield gain, or as some of our guests have said, yield limiting factors, that you at least show a very positive response on wins versus losses. But now I know our listeners are going to be curious because it's coating on fertilizer. How do we get a hold of it?
So through our channel and market partners. So BiOWiSH doesn't sell direct to farms. We sell through the world's largest fertilizer companies, right? And across the globe, from Asia to Australia to Argentina, Brazil, you name it, BiOWiSH is selling it with fertilizer partners. There's, Tanner, I think the way to look at it is back to who's BiOWiSH and what did we look at doing. And if you look at agriculture, if you look at actually the market at large, since the tech boom kind of slowed down, what took over? What really led the highest valuations in the stock market? It was biotechnologies in agriculture. It was the leading space. Then you look at how has the industry shifted for the last 7 to 10 years, and you talk about the fertilizer manufacturers, these commodity players. How many of those have really put on enhancements onto their fertilizers 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, right? But now you look at it today, the surge across all the major commodity players in the world. And BiOWiSH saw that market change coming over 12 years ago. That's what we invested in. That's what our 2 Fortune 500 companies invested in with us, the venture capitals and all the rest that we put into BiOWiSH, is to make sure that when we target and work with these large fertilizer companies, we prove that our product is stable and we prove it's efficacious. So really, how do you buy it? Well, for your listeners, go to ADM. ADM's looking to supply it to you today, and they're ready and set and have product in the marketplace.
Nice. And I'm sure they chose to work with you guys because of those proven results. But as we wrap up our conversation today, what do you really want our listeners to walk away with? Alex, do you want to start with that?
Sure. I would just say that, again, biologicals are, plants are co-evolved with them over a large amount of time. So everyone's familiar with rhizobium in soybeans. That's one specific example, and obviously that's how soybeans get their nitrogen, primarily by fixing it from the air. But again, every plant species on Earth really has some sort of a microbiome associated with it. So, and these microbes really do things. Again, as we do this research in the lab, we notice, major root phenotypes, nutrient uptake under highly controlled conditions. They really drive a lot of it. So the microbes are quite important, and especially important is a stable chain to get them to the field and to make sure that they're not overmining the soil. And because these are very targeted microbes, you're not doing that. You're not going to be overmining your soil of nutrients via these pathways that these microbes contain.
I like that. And Bill, how about you? What else do you want to wrap up with?
Yeah, Tanner, I'll probably give it to you in two parts, right? First is the BiOWiSH mission. What are we after? The BiOWiSH mission that we set out to do is to help feed the world and to do it sustainably and economically for the farmer. So that's the high-level mission we're after. But what do we want this specific farmer to take away today? What did BiOWiSH also set out to do? It really comes to these points. We're looking at how do you get consistent performance on technology of biologicals? Because there's been a knock in the marketplace. We know that. We realize it. We're living in the space. So how do you get consistent performance is number one. Well, I think you can see that across the over 300 research trials that we've done with reputable research organizations across the globe, and to the demo trials that we've got tens of thousands of acres on, there's a strong correlation between those two that show the consistent performance in the high 80%. But it's not just about consistent performance. What's the second piece of that? Can you do that across a lot of climates and soil types and environments and the like? Right? Because I'm not doing a p-value test on your farm. That's why we do the meta-analysis, right? Is to say, does this work everywhere? Because you can't just do a p-value test on a single farm. We do that in research, but we want to make sure that it works across everybody's operation. The next piece to that is the management practices. I've talked about a couple different countries here. In the United States here, I look out my window and what do I see? I see a planter that a guy's driving across the field, right? And I'm harvesting, I'm using GPS points, I'm using precision ag, all those great things that we've adopted and been part of over the last 50 years. And then I go back to Asia or Africa and those places that we work, and I got a guy manually going and applying the field. So both the management practices and the economics with the yield goals are different in those two environments. So can BiOWiSH work across those management practices in combinations with the different soil types and climates? And then the last piece that we put out to do is to make that at an input cost that makes sense to cereal grain farmers. Right? So for us, that's a zero-sum game. You got to win in every category. You got to be able to win in every category before you take it out and put your reputation on the line to say, this is something that's going to work on your farm. And that's what BiOWiSH set out to do. That's our mission, and that's what we've been able to accomplish over the last 12 years.
That's great, guys. This has been an absolute pleasure. I know our listeners can go learn more if they head to biowishtech.com/ADM, or they could call ADM's fertilizer line. That's 612-340-5957. I'll have that information in the show notes as well. But, guys, this has been a pleasure. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy days to chat with our listeners.
Thank you so much, Tanner. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Tanner.